watching a musical. Morning, everybody. Breaking news. Google's CEO expected to deny allegations of political bias. Big hearing that starts in 1 hour. Watching that. I'm Bill Hemmer, live inside of America's Newsroom. Welcome to Tuesday in New York. How you doing?
Walking in a winter wonderland. I'm Sandra Smith. Good morning, everyone. Sundar Pichai will be facing the House Judiciary Committee this morning. This is his first ever appearance before Congress. He refused to testify on election interference. You'll remember back in September, privacy and anti-conservative bias will be two huge themes that you'll hear a lot about today.
So his goal is to silence the critics. From a transcript, he will say the following: I lead this company without political bias and work to ensure that our products continue to operate that way, end quote. Jillian Turner, live outside the hearing room. Good morning there, Jillian.
Good morning, Bill and Sandra. Lots of excitement and tension awaiting the arrival of Google's CEO. It's a day and a hearing that many on this committee thought might never happen because Google CEO first and most recently declined to participate in a hearing along with his contemporaries in September. Those were the CEOs of Twitter and Facebook. And then this hearing got scheduled for last week, December 5th. But then because of the passing of President George H.W. Bush, that hearing got postponed. So speaking of folks here on Capitol Hill this morning, a lot of them already think he's starting out on the wrong foot.
There's no other company that has a greater control over the internet on searches than Google. And Google has not been coming to any of our hearings, whereas Twitter, Facebook, and others. 90% of all internet searches goes through Google.
On the agenda, data privacy in Google's mega project with China called Project Dragonfly. They're reportedly building a tailored search engine that conforms to the Chinese government's censorship. Other issues, though, will feature front and center. Democrats plan to grill Pichai about fake news and inaccurate information on the search engine. Republicans, for their part, will zero in on anti-conservative bias. In his opening statement, Pichai will also confirm Google is on board with more federal regulation. He'll say, we recognize the important role of governments, including this committee, in setting rules for the development and use of technology. To that end, we support federal privacy regulation. So, Sandra and Bill, tough questions coming at Google's CEO from all directions this morning. We'll keep you updated on everything as it unfolds.
We are watching. Thanks, Jillian Turner. They're live on the Hill. More on this hearing as it begins. One of the lawmakers asking the questions is that guy right there. That's Andy Biggs, House Judiciary Committee. He is our guest coming up in about 28 minutes. Stand by for that.
We want to get to it then. Meanwhile, the border funding battle heads to the White House this morning. Top Democratic leaders Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer will be meeting with President Trump as he fires off a series of tweets this morning about the need for his border wall. Senator Lindsey Graham urging the president to stand firm on funding it.
Dig in, don't give in, get the 5B and put DACA on the table. Make them say no to wall funding. Make them say no to relief for the DACA recipients. Stay strong, Mr. President. You got the right. You're on the right side of this issue.
Kellyanne Conway will be joining us live in just a moment, but we are going to begin with White House correspondent Kevin Corke live on the North Lawn this morning. Kevin, what will the president be able to deliver today?
Well, listen, Sandra, I think the goal would be to get the Democrats today, I don't know, do a little bit of horse trading, if you will, maybe some wall funding in exchange for maybe a movement on DACA, for example. But keep this in mind, and this is important as you sort of look at the overall picture, the 30,000-foot view. With the race for the leadership on the Democratic side coming up over at the Capitol, we're talking about Speaker of the House, for example, it is highly, and I mean highly unlikely that you're going to see a great deal of movement from the Democrats, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. But the president, for his part, remains optimistic. He said this on Twitter not long ago. He said, I look forward to my meeting with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. He makes a very interesting reference here, too, Sandra. He says in 2006, Democrats voted for a wall, and they were right to do so. Today, they no longer want border security. They will fight it at all costs. And Nancy must get votes for Speaker, as I just alluded to. But the wall will get built. He goes on to say this: people do not yet realize how much of a wall, including really effective renovation, has already been built. If the Democrats do not give us the votes to secure our country, the military will build the remaining sections of the wall. They know how important it is. Now, there's some question about whether or not they can actually go about building a wall. Maybe they can help secure it by way of National Guard, but that's a whole nother issue. Still, the wall is said to be, and rightly so, the sticking point. Democrats coming into power, as you know, and so we've talked a bit about this idea of a shutdown, Sandra. If that happens, the calculation is they might be the ones to really suffer for it.
The president, by the way, was willing to put a lot of things on the table to negotiate with Democrats in exchange for wall funding. And they walked away and they said they don't want to do anything because the extreme left doesn't want to do anything because they want open borders. That's the dilemma where Nancy Pelosi is right now.
President Trump wants to throw a temper tantrum and shut down the government over Christmas, over the wall. That's his decision.
We love when we get readouts after big meetings. We expect one again today, and of course, I'll pass along all the details to you once I do. But for now, back to you.
And Cork at the White House. Thank you, Kevin.
Good deal. Let's bring in Kellyanne Conway, Senior Advisor to the President, Senior Counsel, I should say. Kellyanne, how are you? Good morning and welcome back here to America's Newsroom. How concerned?
Always a pleasure.
Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, it starts in about 90 minutes, about 2 hours from now. How concerned is the White House about a shutdown?
Well, look, border security is national security. The president's first and primary duty is to keep the American citizenry safe, and he's trying to do that here. I like what Kevin reminded us, your colleague Kevin Cork, that in 2006 we had something called the Secure Fences Act. Let me go through some of the 26 Democratic senators who voted for that 12 short years ago. Senator Chuck Schumer, Senator Hillary Clinton, Senator Joe Biden, Senator Barack Obama. When politics weren't involved and national security and border security were on their minds, they did the right thing, and we hope they'll do the right thing here. The Democrats have a central question in front of them, Bill. Do they want to keep the government open, or do they want to keep the borders open?
Funding for the wall is at stake. You've got $5 billion in a House bill. You got about $1.6 billion in a Senate bill. I think Nancy Pelosi referred to $1.3 billion earlier this week. I don't know what the numbers are. I don't know where they're going. But what gives on this today?
Look, the House bill with the $5 billion is more in line with what the president has asked for. And it's not just a wall. It's not just the physical wall. It is the wall plus. And the president's 3 tweets this morning reflected that. He said an awful lot in those 3 tweets, and people should read them again, because he said that walls work. We know in El Paso, El Centro, Yuma, for example, San Diego, certainly, when walls were built, you did see a decrease in the number of illegal aliens coming over across those walls. The president has also made a legacy issue and a huge priority of his administration, Bill, stopping the flow of drugs over our southern border. It is literally poisoning and killing 72,000 Americans a year, and so much of that flows through the southern border. So it's not just about the people, it's about the poison coming into our communities. Under this president's leadership, the apprehensions of gang members, the seizures of fentanyl and other deadly drugs are way up. And so his methods are working. The money is important, but it's also beyond symbolism here. We saw what happened with the migrant caravan. So many of the predictions and the hysteria coming from the mainstream media and people in that Democratic Party were completely false. I feel very badly for so many of those migrants who were promised things that could not be delivered to them. They were lied to by people who probably took their money and imperiled their safety and security. But this president is willing to work across the aisle with Leader Schumer and with we guess Speaker Pelosi, but she's also got a critical decision to make. She does not have the votes necessarily for Speaker. It's been really tough for her to get them. So what has she promised some of these outrageously socialist-leaning Democrats in her caucus to become Speaker? It's a good question, but walls work. It's walls plus. And it's also border security is national security. Central question. The president wants to close the borders and keep the government open.
Okay.
The question for the Democrats
that's
do they agree?
Position. Got it. These waters run deep at that meeting today. I want to move to a couple other things while I've got you here. We talked about the Mueller matter before. I know you refer me to the president's private attorneys. I'm not going to ask you in a legal sense here, Kellyanne, because I don't think that this is the proper form to get an appropriate answer. How's he doing since Friday? What has he said since all the news broke on Friday night?
So I've spent an awful lot of time with the president since Friday, traveled with him on Friday. Of course, you know, there was a senior staff dinner with the president and the first lady, which was absolutely lovely and gracious of them. Saw him on Sunday, was with him yesterday. The president is doing his job as president and as commander-in-chief. You cannot be distracted and allow other things to get in the way of the democratically elected president needing to keep us peaceful and prosperous in this country. And he is excellent at doing that. And so over here, it's business as usual. He knows that we've got a lot going on in the lame duck session. You saw the Farm Bill went to conference yesterday. You saw Sonny Perdue, our Secretary of Agriculture, saying that it's a positive step forward for the certainty for our farmers, for agricultural innovation, research and development. Wishes there had been more on the work requirements and forest management, but this is a good thing to build on. The president is also arduously working on criminal justice reform, for example.
No change is what I think the answer is, right? No change.
No change. But if you study President Trump, you see that. You see somebody who's able to continue in his work.
You do have a chief of staff to hire. I know that's his call as well. When is that decision made, do you believe?
That's up to the president. And when the president tweeted out today, there are about 10 people being considered and vying.
What's he looking for in that job?
Well, let me begin with the current chief of staff, who's still on the job, General John Kelly. He is in his 5th decade of public service, and this country owes him a debt of gratitude, not the nonsense that's been spewed about him even recently from the left and from this 29-year-old congresswoman who doesn't seem to know much about anything when you ask her basic concepts about the economy, the Middle East, military funding. Really embarrassing. And for her to even use a slur against him yesterday, and I won't repeat her name or the slur, but let me stand up for General John Kelly. He's done a magnificent job for this country for almost 50 years. And that includes here at the White House as our chief of staff for about a year and a half. Before that, Secretary of Homeland Security from day one of this administration. And before that, a 4-star general and a gold star dad. And we all owe him a debt of gratitude. He will stay on the job through January 2nd, at least. And I think there will be a very peaceful and pragmatic transition to the next chief of staff.
Okay.
But the president has many people who want to serve here.
Could he stay past the 2nd of January? Would that be something the president would want?
That's up to the president, and that's up to the chief of staff, General John Kelly, certainly. I know they both love this country and want there to be a transition to the next leader here. But I want to say something about the role of chief of staff because it doesn't get covered enough. People focus way too much on the chief part, the person who's with the principal most often, the person who is interfacing with the rest of the cabinet, for example. But the of staff part is also important. And I think General Kelly's done a great job making sure that different meetings were staffed, making sure that the staff knew what was happening at all times. And so the chief part is important, but the of staff part is very important as well. There are many people working on this complex and throughout the administration.
Let's stay in contact.
But he needs somebody who he trusts and who is loyal to the country.
Right. I'm out of time, but thank you for yours, and I hope you come back soon.
Thank you.
Okay, Kellyanne Conway, thank you. We'll see when that call is made. Thank you very much. Sandra, what else?
This is a Fox News alert. Former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort planning to battle back against claims he lied to federal investigators. For DOJ official Tom Dupree will join us live next on all of that.
Also, Theresa May looking to avoid further embarrassment. Latest attempt to try and salvage her plan for Brexit. What's going to come of this? All of Europe and the world is watching, Sam.
And a tragic end to a days-long search. The military now declaring 5 missing Marines dead. Details on what happened during that mid-air collision.
Thought of this happening never even crossed my mind. I never imagined that what he was doing was so dangerous. But he really enjoyed flying.
Tuned into you.
16 past Fox News alert. Paul Manafort might be in court later today. Special counsel accusing him of breaking a plea deal by lying to investigators. They also think that he was sharing information with the president's legal team. Tom Dupree, former deputy assistant AG under President George W. Bush. How you doing, Tom? Good morning to you. Is that illegal to share information? Is that against the law?
Well, not per se, no. It's okay to share the information, but I will say this. I understand why Mueller's team would be angry with Manafort if, in fact, he was sharing information with the president's legal team. Manafort knows a lot of what Mueller knows. He obviously knows the questions Mueller's been asking. He would know a lot of the evidence Mueller has gathered. And if it turns out that Mueller's team was sharing all of that stuff with the president's legal team, I get it, why the prosecutors would be upset with Manafort.
But lawyers,
I think they view that as a breach of good faith.
Right, Tom?
Lawyers do talk all the time, but once you enter cooperation proceedings with a prosecutor, I think it's generally understood that you're not then going to share any information you get out of those interactions with someone else who might be involved in the investigation. That's why they're upset.
Okay, now we got all this that was dumped on Friday evening. There's a lot to go through. I know you have over the weekend. I just want to call your attention to one tweet from the president from yesterday. And just so our viewers know, look at the last line in this tweet. Now the Dems go to a simple private transaction, he writes, wrongly called a campaign contribution. It's almost, it reveals a little bit about how the president could defend himself on this, does it not?
It does, Bill, and it's interesting to me because you can see the president taking a number of different tacks. He could deny that he had any involvement in it. He could deny that the payments were made. It doesn't seem like that's where he's going. Based on that tweet you highlighted, it seems as though his defense would be a legal one. That is to say, he's not denying he was involved in this payment, but he's saying it wasn't a campaign contribution. It was more of a personal expense, and thus it didn't violate the law. It looks like that's where he's going.
But by law, if you use your own money, is that illegal?
Well, it depends what you're using it for. If you're using it to contribute to a campaign, you would need to follow all the disclosure laws and those sorts of things. If it's a personal expense, something that he was paying to kind of get himself out of a dicey personal situation, that wouldn't necessarily trigger all of these campaign finance disclosure rules. That's the issue here. It's similar to John Edwards.
Was Stormy Daniels working for his campaign? I think the answer is no, right? I think we can answer that question.
To that is no. Right. Well, the question here is very similar to the John Edwards situation, you may recall, Bill, where prosecutors went after John Edwards for being involved in a scheme to pay off various women who were involved with him. He was ultimately acquitted or declared a mistrial on all of those charges, but that case presented the same issue. It's when you make a payment of this nature, is it properly described as a campaign contribution or properly described as a personal expense?
All right. Wall Street Journal from yesterday, Bill Clinton lied to the public and under oath in a legal proceeding, yet Democrats defended him. Good luck trying to impeach Mr. Trump for campaign finance violations. Tom, do you believe that is where this is ultimately headed?
I think ultimately the tribunal that will make a decision on the president's fate, at least in the near term, is going to be the Congress of the United States through impeachment proceedings. That's not to say he will be impeached. It's certainly not to say that he will be convicted. But I don't think the Justice Department is going to indict him. And so ultimately, I think the president's fate is going to rest initially with the House of Representatives and then ultimately with the United States Senate. And my goodness, it's a 2/3 requirement to remove a president from office following impeachment in the Senate. That's a really high bar, as the Bill Clinton history taught us.
Thank you, Tom. Tom Dupree, nice to talk to you, sir.
Good to see you,
From Washington, you bet. 20 past the hour now, Sandy.
All right, well, next hour, our headliner, thank you, Tom. Our headliner will be former independent counsel Ken Starr. He is going to join us live. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, meanwhile, with strong reaction after 2 Russian bombers end up in Venezuela. We are live with this developing story next.
Accused Russian spy Maria Butina cooperating with federal authorities, prosecutors as part of a plea deal. A source familiar with the agreement telling Fox News she will admit to acting as an unregistered foreign agent. Butina is said to have gathered intelligence on U.S. officials through contacts with the NRA. A hearing is set for her tomorrow afternoon.
Close to the Fox News alert on those 5 Marines missing off the coast of Japan. They have been declared dead after a near week-long search. The U.S. Marine Corps officially ending their search today after making, quote, every possible effort to recover the servicemen following a deadly midair collision. Lucas Tomlinson live at the Pentagon this morning for us. Lucas, do you know what caused the crash?
Sandra, officials say it appears the Marine F-18 came in too fast and collided with the KC-130 refueling plane. 28 U.S. service members have been killed in aviation accidents this year. Mid-air refueling is dangerous anytime, especially so and challenging because this one took place at 2 in the morning off the coast of Japan. The pilot would have been wearing night vision goggles. The crash took place 200 miles off the coast of Japan Thursday. Hours ago, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe sent his condolences to President Trump. Both the pilot and weapons systems officer were able to eject from the F-18, but Marine Captain Jamar Resselard, the pilot, later died. His backseater survived with broken bones. All 5 Marines aboard the KC-130 refueling plane are now pronounced dead. Their names will be released tonight, Sandra.
All right, Lucas. And also, we're hearing Russia has sent bombers to Venezuela on a separate note. When is the last time that they did this?
Sandra, it's been 5 years, and 2008 before that. A pair of Russian supersonic Tu-160 Blackjack bombers departed an airbase from Russia and flew over the North Pole and over the Atlantic to Venezuela. The U.S. intelligence community was watching the flight even before these bombers took off. These are the same type of bombers which launched cruise missiles into Syria to crush a rebellion for many years, supported by the U.S. Yesterday, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo responded, quote, "The Russian and Venezuelan people should see this for what it is. 2 corrupt governments squandering public funds and squelching liberty and freedom while their people suffer." Today, the Kremlin responded. Secretary Pompeo's comments were undiplomatic. Sandra?
Lucas Tomlinson at the Pentagon for us this morning. Lucas, thank you.
About 26 past, back to one of our top stories of the day. We're awaiting a hearing on Capitol Hill. The head of Google about to take questions about political bias in privacy. Congressman Andy Biggs will be in that room for the hearing. He will join us first, telling us what he expects to hear and the questions he will ask. Coming up next. 9:29, about 60 seconds away. Fox News alert now. Trading about to get underway on Wall Street. Markets look to bounce back a little bit from yesterday. And yesterday was interesting, wasn't it? Oh, my. I don't know. We were down. We were up. I think it was about 600-point swing either way, right?
All right. Well,
finished up toward the end.
We're about 30 seconds away from trading, and this is going to be a big day for technology as Google is in focus.
Yes.
We'll get to that, back to our top story in just a moment. But watching those shares that have taken the biggest hit in recent weeks in this sell-off, some of those are technology names. And so here we are, Tuesday of another wild week.
I was just trying to find this. There's the bell. I was just trying to find this tweet from 1 hour ago. The president said, quote, very productive conversations going on with China. Watch for some important announcements. Did not give a date or a time, but maybe that's today. We shall watch it, right?
Well, that possible progress is leading to, look at that, already a 330-point jump in the Dow first few seconds of trading. So a lot of optimism.
My neck is sore. Right? It's, today's Tuesday?
Put your seatbelt on.
It's only Tuesday. Nice to see you, though. 24,741 for the Dow 30 right now, 9:30 here in New York.
Now back to our top story this morning. Google CEO Sundar Pichai set to testify before the House Judiciary Committee in about a half an hour amid claims of political bias within his company. Pichai is expected to deny all of that. And here is part of his prepared statement saying, quote, I led this company without political bias and worked to ensure that our products continue to operate in this way. To do otherwise would go against our core principles and our business interests. We are a company that provides platforms for diverse perspectives and opinions and have no shortage of them among our own employees. Let's bring in House Judiciary Committee member Andy Biggs. Congressman, thanks for coming on this morning. A big day today. How did you perceive that statement from the Google CEO?
It's exactly what I expected, and I think words are cheap, but actions speak louder than words. We have everything from email chains to former employees talking about political bias. There's also bias against their competitors, whether it's their payday loan business, and also what they're doing in China.
What is your tolerance for political bias within a company like this? Would it be okay if they just came out with it and said that this exists and that they continue to operate the way they are? Or are you trying to regulate them?
Well, I don't really want to regulate them. I want the market to regulate them, but it would be better if they came out and were just transparent and said, look, we have this political bias. Our vice president's doing all he can to help the Democrats get elected. We have other people trying to get Latinos out for Hillary Clinton. And it's organized. I mean, it isn't just a simple matter of one person here and there. It's organized within the company. And if that's the case, then just be transparent about it and let the market say, well, I don't want to be affiliated with that company. There's other places to do my searches, et cetera.
So Pichai didn't show up last time. He's going to be there today. Right. You will be in that room. What will you ask him?
I'm going to ask him specifically about competition. I want to ask him also about liability, about human rights violations. So if Google, for instance, is data sharing and providing censorship resources for the Chinese government, who has millions of people in political prison, does he think he should be criminally liable for that? And I think that's important to get from him.
These leaked emails, I know you've already referenced them initially here, that show Google employees plotting to ban Breitbart from Google AdSense, which basically dominates the digital advertising market. This would have a devastating effect on the site's ad revenue. Google accounts for roughly 37% of all the digital advertising revenue out there. What did you make when you learned of those the leaked emails, and what did they show?
Well, it showed me that there is an organized effort to quash anti-liberal or anti-Google sentiment. So Google has this bias, and they want to crush you if you don't agree with them. So it isn't just Breitbart. We've seen other evidence from like Western Journal and some of the others. But here what we have is an overt expression of political bias and using this incredible monopoly system that they have of searching to crush their competitors, political competitors. And that's a real problem in a free republic like we have.
All right, so we'll learn a lot more here and by the way, the timing is really interesting on all of that, right? Because apparently through these leaked emails, we learned that they were seeking to block Breitbart from the AdSense less than 1 month after President Trump took office. So I know that's going to be key in the line of questioning coming from lawmakers in just a short time from now. Meanwhile, got to ask you about the incoming House Judiciary Chair, Jerry Nadler, talking about the allegations that were made in the Michael Cohen memo. He said, if true, these are impeachable offenses. Some of your Democratic colleagues in the House talking about jail time for the president. What do you make of these suggestions coming from your colleagues in the House?
Well, there's a lot of them, but first of all, just remember the day after President Trump won the election, Democrats were already seeking to impeach him. They've already filed 3 resolutions to impeach President Trump. And the second thing I'd say is this is an FEC violation that allegedly an FEC violation. We don't even know that yet, but they're already jumping the gun and jumping to conclusions, and that's for political purposes, in my opinion.
Interesting. So we'll see how all of that goes. And the House Judiciary Committee is front and center today with this Google hearing. Next, I want to ask you about the House Freedom Caucus Chairman Mark Meadows. Possibility of White House Chief of Staff. You felt the need to put out a statement backing Mark Meadows for Chief of Staff. Why are you coming out in such big support of this possible move by the president?
Well, I think Mark Meadows has first of all, he has the talent and capacity to do this. Second of all, I think President Trump, one of the things that's hindered him is sometimes there's been filters to him of information. And I think Mark Meadows sees the world in some ways very similar to the president as far as political ideas. And I think that would be important to have somebody there who's hiring people, who's working with the president, and can converse with the legislative branch as well. I think all those things are critical, and I think it would be very beneficial for President Trump as we get ready to go into the 2020 election cycle. And we need to really shore up what we're trying to do in this presidency and also in the legislative branch.
How do you respond to the criticism of the president that the need for a change in personnel in the White House and shakeups a couple years in? Obviously, there is data to back up that this is not the only president to change chief of staff in this sort of time frame, first term in office. But how do you respond to that sort of criticism?
Well, I hear it, but quite frankly, I think a change is due, and I think that Mark brings a fresh view to it. But look, it's not unusual to bring in people, and I think that he had someone that I'm not sure was the best for him to begin. I think Mr. Kelly has done a great job at stabilizing things, but I certainly think Mark Meadows would bring in some new energy and invigorate the office with the ideas that the president wants to get through in his platform and agenda.
All right, a big day ahead of you there on Capitol Hill. Congressman Andy Biggs, we really appreciate your time on America's Newsroom this morning. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Sandra.
Let's go overseas right now. Is there a potential disaster looming for Theresa May? She's postponing a high-stakes parliament vote on the Brexit deal as the head of the EU says there is no room for renegotiation. So what's going to come of this? Kitty Logan watching it from London. How's the Prime Minister planning to break the deadlock over Brexit, Kitty?
Well, hi, Bill. By delaying that vote, she is hoping to buy more time to find a solution. And today she's visiting European leaders to try and get those reassurances which might convince people back home to support her. Right now, she's having lunch with German Chancellor Angela Merkel in Berlin. Earlier, she met the Dutch Prime Minister. And then this evening, she'll be travelling on to Brussels. The aim to slightly reword that Brexit deal to make it more acceptable to her own parliament. But expectations are pretty low that any significant changes could be made to that document. The EU says the deal is done and they have ruled out reworking it.
The deal we have achieved is the best deal possible. It's the only deal possible. No room whatsoever for renegotiation.
Now, with the EU so reluctant to rework that deal, it seems highly unlikely that these meetings are going to change an awful lot for the Prime Minister. Bill.
Thank you, Kitty. Kitty Logan, we're watching it. Thank you from London today.
Well, the LA Lakers defeating the Miami Heat last night, 108-105, in a final showdown between longtime friends LeBron James and Dwayne Wade. LeBron scoring the game-winning three-pointer. This was Wade's last game in Los Angeles before his retirement at the end of the season. The two hugged it out and swapped jerseys at the end of the game.
We do that after the show. I have Smitty in my jacket, and you give me your handbag. Did I get out of that one okay?
No, we'll let that one just sit right there.
Republican lawmakers pushing the president not to give up on the fight for border security.
We need to get this worked out, and I don't think the president's bluffing. And some folks around here seem to be missing a point.
So President Trump's meeting with top Democratic leaders this morning. Can they get a deal? What comes of a meeting like this? Josh Hawley, who is brand new to the Senate, is our guest out of Washington, D.C., coming up right here.
Plus, an amazing rescue caught on an officer's body cam as they run into a burning building.
Get this guy out of there. Hurry up. I'm with me. The best you can. Flag down, man. Hurry up.